As Jess said, my name is Chris Rackens. I'm professional staff on the Democratic majority side here on the House Natural Resources Subcommittee on National Parks, Forests, and Public Lands. We call it NPFPL for short. Chair Grijalva of Arizona is the full committee chair. He's my primary boss here. But we're also really excited to have a new chair this Congress, Representative Joe Neguse from Colorado. Mr. Neguse is replacing our subcommittee chair from last Congress. Some of you might know her as Secretary Holland now. And I know that Mr. Neguse, as well as all of our members, are really excited to have a chance to continue to work with her in that capacity. In my current role here on the committee, I mostly actually handle Forest Service related issues, but that includes a lot of overlap with Department of the Interior, especially on topics like conservation designations, recreation, and wildfire. I think much like the issues that I work on, the representation at Partners Outdoors really shows the importance of bringing together land management agencies, nonprofits, and businesses to identify cross jurisdictional opportunities for collaboration and shared priorities. So, as you all can probably attest, it presents some obvious challenges and opportunities, especially if the goal with all this is to reach some consensus on issues like climate change, biodiversity, and supporting resource dependent as well as environmental justice communities. At the end of the day, though, a lot of what I do here on Resources Committee and specifically on the subcommittee is be responsive to our memberships. And I know that our new and returning members are really excited to be working with the White House and the new administration on things like America the Beautiful and the America Jobs Plan, including trying to make some new investments in public lands restoration as well as building out a civilian climate corps. All of our members have a ton of ongoing interest in local place-based designations, and I think that includes funding through the Great American Outdoors Act. We're really encouraged by the new administration's efforts to keep Congress updated as they develop and submit project lists for those investments. Turning back to Congress a little bit more, I never know how closely the average person sort of follows the day-to-day dealings here, much less the House of Representatives. But we've actually already passed just about 3 months ago a really big public lands here that package that includes a lot of opportunities to include public lands recreation. Those include top priorities for Chair Grijalva and Chair Neguse, including a million acre withdrawal around the Grand Canyon, as well as numerous provisions from the Colorado Outdoor Recreation and Economy Act. That's the CORE Act. I'm sure many of you are familiar with that. All of these and other provisions combined, we put together as the Protecting America's Wilderness and Public Lands Act. If you're looking for a shorthand on that, PAW Plus is kind of what we've settled on here to deal with that mouthful. As the name implies, it does include a lot of wilderness and conservation, but there's also thousands of miles of wild and scenic rivers, new conservation areas, new recreation areas. And I think overall, the bill could have a really positive impact for the outdoor recreation economy. In addition to the base text, we had a ton of amendments adopted on the floor. And even though we ended up with a mostly kind of party line vote, we do have good bipartisan support as well as support from the senators representing a lot of the states covered in that bill. However, I think those senators are mostly Dem senators, and historically, Republican components are needed to put together any type of lands or recreation package. I think looking ahead this Congress, we certainly have a strong opening offer from the House, and I'm sure, as John has assured me before, he's saving Paul Plus for his August speech reading, so something for him to look forward to there. My primary point here, though, basically is just that I think when it comes to recreation, our members and their constituents really have a high level of interest in doing recreation policy, as well as putting forward these place-based designations and protections. Paw Plus is kind of old news at this point, I think, in terms of the House action. So let me try to give a little bit of a preview of things to come, since I think part of the intention of me being here is to sort of speak to the future. Most imminently, we actually have a recreation-focused hearing coming up on next week on Tuesday, June 8th. Hopefully, I'm breaking a little bit of news to some of you for this. The bills that we're going to include in that are going to be the SOAR Act from Representative Neguse, which I think a lot of you have tracked and advocated for in the past. We're going to have MAP from Representative Moore, environmental justice and recreation permitting by committee member Tlaib from Michigan, and finally the Ski Fee Retention Act from Rep. Custer of New Hampshire that has been newly reminted with a great acronym as the SHRED Act, the Ski Hill Resource for Economic Development Act. We really have fun with acronyms here on Resources, if you can't tell. So I bring that up as well to speak to sort of our democratic priorities. I think these bills really speak to that. Opportunities to improve access, prioritizing diversity, equity, and inclusion in public lands management, and promoting recreation and economic contributions of our public lands. Beyond the immediate districts or specific legislation, as I mentioned, I think our members are really looking at opportunities to better account for climate change in land management decisions, promote clean water, recreation, biodiversity, and continuing to invest in land management agencies, especially when it comes to infrastructure, restoration, and preparing for wildfire. We, the committee, are participating in ongoing discussions with the administration about the Civilian Climate Corps, as well as American Jobs Plan and the America the Beautiful Conservation Initiative. But I know I might be getting to a little bit more choppy waters with that. So let me try to close out here on a more bipartisan note. I think the one thing we can all agree on is that the resource allocation and capacity at our land management agencies has not kept up with the need, especially in the context of climate change. And that, seems to be true on everything from recreation and planning to deferred maintenance and restoration. Um, Looking forward, I'm hopeful that the committee and Congress can, in a bipartisan way, build on the designations and investments made by the Dingle Conservation Act, as well as the Great American Outdoors Act. This has obviously been a crazy, past year here with COVID, making us all hit the pause button, with the parks closing, tribes scrambling to protect vulnerable communities and, firefighters being forced to deal with these record fires, as well as, a pandemic. And I think, if COVID-19 has taught us one thing, it's, that there's a real opportunity to take some of these lessons, learn, hit reset, and, ensure that we're moving forward, recognizing how truly important public lands recreation is for our, physical and mental health, as well as our economic, well-being for businesses and individuals that depend on the public lands. The budget and annual appropriations bills here going forward, that's going to be another big opportunity to I think address some of these issues. And lastly, kind of the biggest open question, and I know you guys are covering this in other sessions today, but the fate of any transportation or infrastructure package is still kind of an open question. But I will put in kind of a closing plug for the federal lands transportation and the federal lands access programs, which have historically been covered, in those bills. And I think there is a really great opportunity for a group and the members that are kind of represented here at Partners Outdoors to not only look at those programs, but to push for new investments, including some things that I think I heard right before I jumped on here, including natural resiliency and green infrastructure, or expanding EV and telecommunications infrastructure in those high visitation places. So I think I'm surely at my time here. So I'll just say in closing a big thanks to everyone for inviting me to speak and being interested in what we have to say here. Please keep up all the good work, and know that I'm always happy to talk more about all things recreation and resources related. So again, big thanks. I will yield my time, and looking forward to hearing from John and others today as well.
Thanks so much. I may have some follow-up questions. That's great to hear about the hearing. I'm going to pass it on to John, and then maybe I'll ask a couple questions to wrap it all together.
Thanks, Jessica. It is good to be here. As I went through the list of participants, I saw a lot of familiar names, and as I scroll through the people that are watching, it is fun to see a lot of people who I've worked with in different capacities over the years. So I really do appreciate being invited to present and be part of this panel. So by way of background, um, for myself, I have been here at the Senate Energy Committee for about 6 months. Started here at the beginning of this Congress, working for Ranking Member Barrasso. Before that, I spent the last 3 years at Interior. Um, the last role that I played at Interior was one of the Deputy Assistant Secretaries for Fish and Wildlife and Parks under Rob Wallace. So was able to work very closely with many of you in that capacity, and I feel really lucky to be here, where I have a lot of the same portfolio items that I did at Interior. So kind of bringing my experience at Interior back to the Hill, and hopefully can use that to further the agenda in recreation a little bit here in this role. So I feel like this is a really appropriate time for this conference to be happening, as we're kind of coming out of this strange year, and I'm sure we're all in the same situation, where as we're trying to get out more and more, we're seeing a lot of people really working hard to uh, get out there, out amongst it. And I think it's appropriate that we're having these conversations now, to make sure, as the world gets back to business, that we're able to implement, enact the right policies. We're able to hear from you all, and make sure that we're headed in the right direction. I do admit I am a little bit sore today after spending the weekend with my kids and wife hiking and fishing and rock climbing. I am very, very happy to spend some time out in the sun. So here we are. Conferences. I feel like conferences like this are a really good opportunity for us to listen. I think we probably benefit more from by hearing from you all than you do from hearing from us. Chris and I did not know each other before we started planning for this, and I think that I hope that he would agree that we've had some meaningful conversations as we've prepared, and I do look forward to working with him as we work to find common ground and move forward, uh, uh, legislating on our mutual priorities. So, what are our priorities here in the Senate with the Republicans? For Senator Barrasso, right now his top priority is a bill that we introduced a couple of weeks ago called the Film Act, the Federal Interior Lands Media Act. This is our proposal for modernizing the permitting process for filming on public lands. Um, I think as we come out of this COVID situation, um, uh, for those of for the people that weren't able to actually get out, um, it was important to be able to at least virtually visit public lands, even to the point where the Park Service established virtual field trips, and we've learned that a lot of the content producers spend a lot of time that we feel like is unnecessary uh, getting permitted to film or record activities on public lands that would otherwise be allowed. So our bill, the Film Act, was introduced a couple of weeks ago to deregulate a little bit. Maybe that's not the right word. Simplify the process, and ensure that people who aren't going to have a detrimental impact to the resource, people that aren't going to have a detrimental impact to other visitors' experience, shouldn't have to get a permit, regardless of whether or not they intend to monetize their content. We feel like if they're out there doing something legal, they should be able to record it and share that. So we're excited about that. We feel like it's something that can get broad support. Senator Barrasso is the only sponsor of that bill right now because we did really work quickly to get it introduced, and that's going to be our priority for now. Hopefully, we can get it enacted quickly. Other priorities, we really do have a lot of overlap with Chris's list. Maplands is a priority for Senator Barrasso. The ski fee retention bill. I have not quite gotten used to calling it the Shred Act, but we'll get there. And the SOAR Act, while Senator Barrasso is not a co-sponsor, it is something that we support, and we appreciate the work that's been done there, and we intend to see it moving through the process as we talk with the majority here in the Senate. We hope to see that move as well. And I think really it deserves mention, the Great American Outdoors Act. Congress, Park Service, all the federal agencies, all of the users have spent many years talking about the need to address the deferred maintenance problem in our federal facilities, and the stars aligned, and we were finally able to get something enacted. I personally was part of the team that oversaw the development of the process for identifying the projects that we felt needed to be addressed with that money. So we are very interested in watching the implementation continue. We're pleased with the work that's being done there, and we also find it. We feel like it's very important that those dollars be stretched as far as they can, especially utilizing partnerships with non-governmental partners especially some of the ones that you guys talked about yesterday or heard from yesterday, um, as well as in addition to the Legacy Restoration Fund, the Land and Water Conservation Fund. Want to make sure that those dollars are used wisely, that they're used in a way that benefit the public, and as much as possible can be used in partnership with the non-governmental groups that are able to work together with the government. So how does it get done? I think that really is the question. I think groups like this, Jessica certainly plays an important role in advocating for the priorities and the policies of the members of this group. ORR and many others really play, at least from my perspective, a valuable role because we can't know everything that's going on without advocates telling us what matters. So conferences like this, advocacy from groups certainly helps us make decisions and hopefully make the right decisions. I think it's important that we take advantage of any legislative opportunities that we have. Um, while Congress is talking about infrastructure, that's not lost on us. We don't have any official proposals to add to the infrastructure bill right now, but we're paying very close attention. And if the opportunity does arise, we will certainly make an offer of something that we feel like would make sense to be included in that bill. Um, I think working across the aisle and across the hill in areas like recreation is very possible. We are able to focus on areas where we agree, and in this space there are a lot, and work together to advance the priorities and make access to and ability to use our public lands easier. So with that, I'm probably out of my time, but happy to take any questions or comments and certainly feedback on things that members of this group think we ought to be paying attention to.
Thank you so much. That was really informative for me as we've been in this conference for the past 2 days. So it's good to hear where the conversations evolved, and glad to hear that even just preparing for this panel had started a good dialogue because the whole uh, thought behind Partners Outdoors is that it brings people together, usually in person, and we can't wait to get back to that. But key people that are thinking about land and water issues all the time, like yourselves, it's bringing us together to have the conversations and to network. So I'm really happy to hear that. Really excited to hear about the hearing next week, SOAR, MAPLAN, SHRED Act. I'm also not used to that. I know we've got some of our NSAA partners and ski partners on the call. So not used to calling it that, but so supportive of those bills that you mentioned. So really excited to see where that can go. And then also, John, thanks for your work on Great American Outdoors Act. We still talk about that on a daily basis, are working on it. I heard a lot yesterday from our partners at the Forest Service and DOI and how they're continuing to implement it, and just really applaud everyone who was part of that and your leadership there. It will continue, I think, for years to come to be groundbreaking legislation. And I think that will go into, we barely have time for questions, but I think I want to ask one before we go to our breakout sessions to really dive into what you've all just discussed. But, how do we think about the success of the Great American Outdoors Act? And maybe this is two parts, and learn from it as an industry. It was just so big and such a important piece of legislation. How do we get to the point where we get a Great Outdoors Act every 5 years, especially in the legacy fund side? How do we think about maintenance backlog and become like a farm bill where every 5 years there's like a must pass recreation legislation? And maybe it's not that large of an investment, but maybe it's some of these, the Film Act that you mentioned, the SOAR Act, some of these management bills that people are looking to our industry like they look to other industries and say, what can we do for the recreation industry? It's about that time that we should get a must pass bill on. So I guess one, how do we continue that momentum into that? And then the follow up to that is, what do you think the barriers are for recreation being seen in the national dialogue as one of those kind of must-pass packages that we know our other committee friends are always working on. So I'll hand that over to you guys. I know we only have a couple minutes, but would love some of your closing thoughts around that.
So I'll be very brief because I'm interested in hearing what Chris has to say. But I believe really right now it's up to um, those bureaus, the agencies that have the money. They need to be really smart about the way that they spend it. They need to be able to leverage it as far as possible, and demonstrate that they know how to use it. That Congress should give them more. It's never going to be easier. It's always going to be difficult to uh, get Congress to spend money. It's a scarce resource, and there are a lot of places that need it. And to demonstrate um, on the part of the bureaus that they value the money, and Congress ought to keep authorizing it. I believe is the where we are now. Maybe in about a year and a half from now, um, once they've demonstrated that they can do it, and I think they will, that will be the time for the advocates to get out, and start talking to members of Congress about what needs to happen next. And you can't wait too long because what you don't want to have happen is it expire um, before it gets reauthorized. So just the world came together last year and really got behind a worthy cause, and I think it can happen again.
Thank you. Thanks. That's awesome. Chris?
Yeah, I guess just real quick, I would say, there's certainly pros and cons to this kind of a reoccurring authorization. I think, the one kind of cautionary tale is the FLORIA collection authorities that tends to get extended through appropriations bills now. But in terms of like Great American Outdoors, especially, right? I mean, for me, I always think about this stuff, and somewhat as a mindset of a conservationist, but right, it's always about the long game. It's easy to identify problems, but a lot of times, even if there's consensus on a solution, as we saw with Great American Outdoors, LWCF deferred maintenance can be many years in the making. So I think it is important just to have continued focus and being able to define both the problems, and then, like I think John said, there is always going to be a lot of hesitancy. Although we all agree that there's a need for more resources, there is going to be some hesitancy always to, kind of just write a blank check. So I think with something like a Great American Outdoors, it is a great opportunity for the administration to show that they can sort of, put that money to good use on the ground. I think that will help make the case for when we start talking about issues that get beyond the deferred maintenance, which I think is kind of where our members are starting to think about a lot more in terms of restoration, recreation infrastructure, those type issues that would hopefully benefit the visitor experience, kind of across the board for folks if we were able to better prioritize those things down the road.